somatic, like soma is the core of the word, just means body. So it's using your body as a tool to heal. And it wasn't until I did the somatic work that I realized, like, yes, the story is going to exist, but what I actually need to work on is all the feelings and the emotions that I have bottled up my whole childhood. We go through experiences in our life, and it can be really traumatic experiences, and it can even be the minor experiences that happen in our life where we're just not safe in the moment to be able to express our feelings. So we kind of store them within us, right? So like the energetic emotion is kind of like, within almost like the organs of our body, right? And what's really interesting about it is a lot of the health issues that we find ourselves having can actually be a result of suppressing and storing our emotions.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the show. I'm so excited for today's guest. You guys know that somatics is something that I'm super interested in and that I've dove deeper lately. And Khrissie is the expert. So Khrissie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's just, a pleasure to talk to you today. And especially because I know that you went to, that kind of big conference recently with so many amazing speakers. I wish I could have been there. So I'm also looking forward to hearing your viewpoints too.
We'll give you guys a little behind the scenes. We actually recorded this prior to me going and then had some technical difficulties. And so Khrissie was kind enough to re-record with us today. And what's really cool is that one of the things we touched on a little bit before was the importance of being trauma informed. And I learned so much more about this. So before we get into all of that, can you please introduce yourselves and talk to us about your journey to how you got to do what you do today?
Yes. It's been a journey, that's for sure. So I'm Khrissie. I am a somatic movement healer, and I trained a few years ago with Sada Simone. And it's been one of the greatest things I've done. From a young kid, I was always really interested in like dancing and moving and expressing myself. And I'd be that kid like in the shop, like bopping around as like my mom was shopping, or like while I'm waiting to cross the road. And I used to do dance competitions and talent shows. And so like moving and all of that was just part of my whole life, something I just loved. But I actually then went into creativity. I was always a really creative kid. I went into design and branding and built a whole career around that. But while I was in the design industry, I actually still had a passion for, I guess, like I talk about, I always loved movement, but since a kid, I always like cared about other people. I remember like watching this old woman like cross the road, and I really wanted to help her. But I think I was only like 6 at the time, and I didn't understand like road awareness and stuff like that. And I'd always just have a care for people. And that really came throughout my whole career, and seeing people sad and down at work or crying or going through a really hard time. I just couldn't bear it. So I went out of my own way in agencies I was in to either like set up a group to help support people who I was working with and my colleagues, or I would just be like, right, I'm going to do a laughing workshop. I've seen something online. I'm going to like see if I can run this. I was not trained in any way, but I did it, and it was a lot of fun and people enjoyed it. And I was like, okay, there's something in this. So I always knew there was this little spark in me that I was like, I need to help people more in some way. And I thought it was just through design that I could do that, right? Helping health and wellness brands, especially once I left the design industry and went into my own branding business. But there was still a niggle in my soul, like, come on, there is something else here, but I just didn't know what it was. And I went on an amazing healing journey in like 2020. I started with somatic work, working with my inner child, working with anger, working with, so many parts of myself. And I realized then like how powerful it was. And I ended up going on a retreat a couple of years later with the teacher that first taught me the somatic work. It was Rachel Pringle. And it was so eye-opening. And I was like, my heart felt so like open and expansive. And I realized the fears I had. I used to be fearful of men. And I didn't even realize it till I was on the plane on the retreat, sitting next to men, being like, holy shit, I don't like this. And yeah, and it was really beautiful how everything just started to unfold for me and the visions I was getting. And I was tapping more into my spirituality and having visions and like almost like inner knowings of things. And like, yeah, and I was really starting to use my intuition more and more. And I landed back in the UK after this amazing retreat that was really soul expansive. And yeah, I was just in my hotel and an ad popped up for this like somatic healing training. And I was like, oh my God, what is this? This sounds great. And I already knew a little bit about Sada Simone and him using like movement and dance and expressiveness to, yeah, almost help you tap into all parts of who you are, but I had no idea how deep it went. I didn't even read the sales page. I just asked him, I was like, I'm a branding designer. Like, can I do this? I just felt a call. It was like a hell yes moment. And he was like, of course you can, as long as you're willing to do the inner work yourself, jump on board. And I was like, okay, sure, sign up. Oh my God. I've never been so committed to anything in my life. Like the homework we had to do, the stuff we had to research on, like the science behind it, like it was so deep. And he's a big fan of all the speakers that you saw at that conference as well. Yeah, it was just incredible. And I kind of haven't looked back since. My branding business has kind of taken a massive step to the side because, yeah, I've just realized this is like my true soul passion.
Yeah, I love to hear that. I also love to hear the kind of evolution from like what you were doing and then starting your own business and then evolving into a new business, which is so beautiful. For somebody that's listening and that's still like, okay, I'm not sure what somatics even is still to this point, can you kind of break it down for us and explain it in a way that somebody who's maybe never heard of it can understand it?
Yeah, sure. So somatic, like soma is like the core of the word, just means body. So it's using your body as a tool to heal through the body, right? So we all know about like traditional talk therapies, mindset work, using our mind and our brain to almost like create kind of new timelines and new stories for ourselves, right? To take away, you know, what we've been telling ourselves for a really long time and like creating something new out of it, right? That's kind of like the basis of like my understanding of my experience of talk therapy. And that's all really good. But the problem is sometimes is that as we're kind of talking through the stories and going through them, we can really get stuck in a loop. And we almost can't always let go of these stories, right? So a story that was really strong for me was like my dad not being in my life, but having a family with someone else and having loads of kids. And me being like, but what about me? Like, why don't you want me, right? And that was a story that was throughout my whole childhood. And I couldn't get over it. And I didn't know how to get over it. And it wasn't until I did the somatic work that I realized, like, yes, the story is going to exist, but what I actually need to work on is all the feelings and the emotions that I have bottled up my whole childhood. And I didn't know how to express them when I was 5 and then going into a teenager. I didn't know what to do with these emotions, right? And so I just became more withdrawn as the years went on and became quieter and quieter and quieter. And that was just me to protect myself and be safe. And so that's what happens really is we go through experiences in our life, and it can be really traumatic experiences, and it can even be the minor experiences that happen in our life where we're just not safe in the moment to be able to express our feelings. So we kind of store them within us, right? So like the energetic emotion is kind of like, yeah, within almost like the organs of our body, right? And what's really interesting about it is a lot of the health issues that we find ourselves having can actually be a result of suppressing and storing our emotions, right? So, you know, I noticed like with my thyroid problem, and obviously it can be caused from outside factors, but it also has an emotional factor built into that, you know, so IBS and like all these kinds of problems that we find ourselves today having, I have found has resolved in my body literally through doing somatic work. So all it really is connecting to our body and finding a safe way where we can express ourselves through our body and feel the emotions so we can like let them go. So it's allowing ourselves to be in a space with a practitioner where we feel safe to finally feel those feelings we could never feel from when we were like born up until now.
I had like a little giggle and I'm smiling so big because you literally mentioned like thyroid. I also have an underactive thyroid. And then I've had IBS and SIBO and like all these things. And one of the things that I loved when Dr. Gabor Mate spoke at the event is, I mean, he talks about this a lot throughout, and it's something that was inspired by Peter Levine, which is the fact that what we experience as stress isn't about what's happening to us, but how we are feeling alone in the experience inside of us. And I think what can be really helpful when people understand the way that you just explained somatics super clearly is that it can be, as you mentioned, these like events that happen when you were a kid. Some of them might be more traumatic than others. It can also really be like you were in a grocery store and you felt for a moment that you couldn't find your mom and you were really scared about it. And then you might have like gotten yelled at because your parent was scared. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I have to internalize that and like maybe take on shame or responsibility. And like, obviously as a 3, 5-year-old, whatever, it's not on you. And so just that concept, I think, is really eye-opening for people because sometimes it can be like, oh, I don't feel like I have this like big, huge thing that happened to me that I need to heal. But it's so often also all the little things, which is personally like my journey, have continued to build up, and ways of being and patterns, as you talked about, and stories that we tell ourselves, that then it's like we get to, you know, me in like my early 30s being like, oh my gosh, my body is screaming at me because I haven't listened to all these little things, and I haven't had also the tools to figure it out. And I've been in talk therapy for years, and I love my therapist. The work I've done with her has been amazing. And I loved how you said the fact that it's being able to feel those feelings in a safe space with a practitioner. Can you talk more about what that looks like? I'll share my experience. It was my first time working with a SEP, they call it here, somatic experiencing practitioner. And it's really hard to describe. I've been like telling a few friends and people around me, but so I'm super curious what your experiences have been for you personally as you went through it and in the retreat and things, but also what does it look like now when you work with people?
Yeah, so a memory that comes up for me when I was working through this work and going somatically, right? What's really interesting is obviously the mindset work really goes into the story, right? And the somatic work and how I was trained was about not going into the story. But the more I have gone into my own work, it's so important that they work together. Right. So I have a lot of clients that are in therapy or have gone to therapy. So they're working with their mind and their body simultaneously. Right. So they can bring up a story in therapy. They can then come to me and work through it. Right. So we're not only rewiring our brain and the story that happened to us, but we're releasing the emotion attached to it. So we can almost let go of that story in our mind and it becomes less of a burden. And for me, something within my experiencing was me as a teenager and realizing like how depressed I was and having boyfriends that treat me really badly. And yeah, seeing my mum at the point of like wanting to end her life, right? I had so many experiences at a certain point in my teenage life that really rocked my boat. And in my mind, I could picture myself in my room, feeling alone and not knowing what to do. So I was able to, in a somatic experience, picture myself either as me or my teenage self separate to me. So I could be the adult for the teenager. And I could almost like dance and like let that emotion go with her, right? She was holding on to a lot of rage that she couldn't let go of. She was angry that she had a life where she was in this situation. So then what you do is you tend to play music, and I also use affirmations to help bring that emotion up, right? And it's all you have to do to begin with is just start feeling it in your body. You might not want to express it straight away, depending like how big it feels in your body. It's just about taking it step by step. So that, you know, can you just feel that anger? Can you allow it to come in? You know, can you allow yourself to connect to that story if you want to, so you can be there for that version of yourself? And then you can really start using your body to express that rage, right? You can put on like System of a Down or something like that, like a really kind of like rock emo song to really express that through your body, right? There is all these genres of music have a place in the somatic world, like for sure. And yeah, you can like hit a pillow and you can sound out and you can like shake your body and like use your body as that tool to like literally shake it off and like let it go. Right. And it takes time. Like you're not going to be able to release it for the first time. You might have years of stored anger. And I think I mentioned before, I like to talk about emotions in terms of bubbles in our body. So you're 5 years old, you're really angry at something, you don't know how to express your anger, you're not in a safe space where your parent can hold you in anger, so you hold it within you, right? And that stores itself. You then grow up a little bit, maybe you're at school, something really annoys you. Again, you store another piece of anger, right? And you're storing all these bubbles of anger that you haven't been able to express. And then what happens is every time you feel anger, you're not only feeling the anger in the present moment, you're feeling the anger from all those other times you've been angry. Right. So then this is where like anger can be so prevalent in a lot of people. And this is why we have to have compassion for so many people. They've just got a lot of bubbles of anger. And it doesn't mean like, you know, how they treat people is okay, but we have to have compassion that they haven't had a space to release it. So, you know, it's really important for us to start to like let go piece by piece, right? And we might have to do rage rituals for like the next 10 years, right? But it's about enjoying the process, right? It doesn't always have to be held in so much like darkness. It's about accepting the variety of emotions we have and just using our body to express them in whatever way feels good to us.
Yeah, I love that you touched on anger because I think it's a big one that a lot of us have because there are so many situations where it's deemed not okay by our society to let go of the anger, right? Whether as a kid or later on, it's like so much of us, because on the outside, it's not supposed to. And I'm not talking about like letting it out on somebody, obviously.
No.
But just that feeling. And it's funny because the other day I was walking with my husband. And since having gone to this conference, I feel like I can see things a lot more clearly and I can understand like the emotions coming in. And we were walking by the river and he said something that really triggered me. And I was like, this isn't about you right now, but I'm going to take this rock and I'm going to throw it as hard as I can.
Yes.
And it was like so good in that moment. I just like wanted to scream and I let out a sound. I didn't let myself go completely because I was in public and there was people walking around. And so I'm conscious of that too, right? How much like that external, and it felt so good. Like it just brought me back to all the times that I was angry and how much I just, as you said, like let those bubbles kind of build up within. And I love that what you're saying, as you start feeling it, you feel every other bubble that you've been putting inside, which makes so much sense. And I think, yeah, there is also like as women, we are especially, I think, not shown that it's okay to let our anger out and that we're supposed to just be like, everything's okay. Like, I'm good. So, yeah, I really love that. I also love that you mentioned your teenage years because I think something that is often talked about in therapy or in the spiritual world is how much of the trauma or the things that you've experienced happened when you were a kid. And so sometimes people are like, oh, I don't remember anything bad in my childhood. And yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to have happened before the age of 7 for you to be still storing it and needing to let it go.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, if you have been through a hard time, sometimes you can block it. Like I definitely have remembered things like really intense traumas from my childhood that I had no idea that even happened to me. And yeah, what Gabor Mate even talks about is like, you know, it can even be, you know, from that moment where we're born. Like I remember him saying is like, you know, when we cry, our parents are like, oh, they'll self-soothe, they'll be fine, like we can leave them on their own. And actually there's no truth to that, right? Because think when we're a baby, we don't know how to do that. We can't regulate our own emotions. Like we're not that intelligent yet. We're only just like learning how to like drink and eat and like find our way around the world. And yeah, so actually like going in and giving your child a cuddle, you're teaching them how to self-soothe, right? So it can actually be a trauma experience just being left to cry, right? And if anyone's done that, it doesn't mean you're bad. It's just like the information that we're given. And it surprised me. I had no idea. But then even deeper than that, what's really interesting is that we can hold trauma from, I think it's like 4 or 5 generations behind us, right? And think we're now the like we are the most important generation because we're the ones actually transforming and releasing our emotions. So I feel like this is why it feels so heavy for a lot of us, is because if my mum was in a really traumatized state and she was holding that in and she was pregnant with me, of course it's going to go into me because I'm part of her body, literally. And it kind of then that's how it kind of gets passed down the generations. So yeah, part of my work, like I'm deciding not to have children, but I actually believe like in this lifetime, I am truly here to transform and transmute like the trauma and everything that's happened from my generations. Like that's why I'm here on this earth. And I truly believe that. And I feel like, yeah, having children, that isn't like my role in the world. But you know, with the children in my family, I can then help them with their emotions, right? I actually did like a little rage ritual with my niece and I showed her, okay, this is how we can be angry. And she loved it. She actually had so much fun and she was screaming and shouting and hitting the pillow. And she was like, Winnie, I feel so happy now. She calls me Winnie. That's my nickname. Yeah. And it was just really beautiful to like see her at 5 years old express herself and have that space to express herself. Like that was almost healing for me, like and my inner child to be like, we now have the tools to allow the generations to feel their emotions. Like how beautiful is that?
I love that. It's interesting you brought this up because one of the big things throughout the days, having kids is something that my partner and I want. And I was like, oh my God, like I have still so much to heal and I don't want to pass this on. And like, I'm never going to be fully healed before I start. And so there was a lot of those questions. And so if anybody listening is also like, oh my gosh, I want to create a family. And one of the things that they talked about is the importance of not going to seek the trauma healing in the process of pregnancy. And really in that process being like, you know, if you do somatic work, being receiving and just loving and not necessarily kind of digging through because you never know what's going to come up. And it's just a time to feel supported, not to kind of go dig deep.
One of my clients is actually pregnant who's going through my group program. And she asked me about it. And I said, like, yes, you can do the somatic work and it's fine. Obviously adapt it. Like there's certain things, you know, don't hold your breath too much. Like don't go too mad on the anger work, you know, and be really mindful of your body. And if she hadn't already done like this kind of work, I would have probably said no. But yeah, because she understands her body so much, I trust that she is going to do what is right for her. It's been really interesting, you know, like she's been able to like help even process things like her body changing, right? And processing more of the emotions that are showing up in the moment, right? And like you said, we all know the emotions that are showing up now are actually linked to something else within us, right? You know, if we're always getting annoyed at our partner and like for not doing silly things, that's actually got nothing to do with it. It's linked to something else deeper. Like I used to be like, I'm like, why isn't the dishwasher done and the bin taken out? And like, I'm so like much more relaxed about it now because I've had to like be like, oh, I'm controlling it. Why am I controlling it? Okay, I need to control something so I feel safe. Okay, why don't I feel safe, right? And you can start to connect the dots and go backwards and find like the root cause of why that is, right? But I think for me, like if you're getting pregnant and going into that space, I think the main thing is just like trying to find the tools where your nervous system is as calm as it can be.
Yeah.
You know, so even actually when it comes to delivering your baby, you have the tools and the breaths and the calming mechanisms to relax your body, to allow your body almost to, you know, because it's traumatic having a baby, right? And lots of people talk about it. But like if we can start to like really lean into our breath, to trust our body, to find safety in our body, we're almost going to like, yeah, allow our body to like let go even more. You know, hopefully pregnancy is like a little bit kinder to you in that sense, right? I had a friend who was really good at all this stuff. She had like no pain medication, nothing. She just gave birth. And I was like, wow, the power of our mind and our bodies when we allow ourselves to go there is actually incredible.
Yeah, it is. And I love that you clarify that it can be extremely helpful for nervous system regulation. I think where I was going was not seek for like potential past memories that we don't remember. Yes, exactly. Can you talk more about the importance of nervous system regulation? Because obviously, this is something that somatics helps us so much with and that we've understood is really important. Yeah. How can it help? And why is it that we're in need of a nervous system regulation?
Yeah, like for me, obviously, you hear like fight, flight, or freeze so much. And in my experience, in terms of like how I try to understand it and talk about it, freeze is almost like that numbness. It's almost like that depressive state, right? Like that pause, like don't want to do anything. It's like stagnant. Whereas like that kind of flight feeling, that high stress, your body's almost vibrating, that kind of goes into anxiety, right? In terms of like the two ends of the spectrum. But with life and how it is and how stressful it can be, most of us are like, our cortisol levels are constantly on the go. And like, I didn't even realize literally till the end of last year that I was like chronically stressed. I was like, why is my jaw always hurting when I wake up in the morning? Like, I realized even just sitting, like my body would always be tense, right? I wouldn't ever be able to just like fully relax into my seat. And I was like, oh my God, I'm holding on to so much stress all the time. And so this is where I started going deeper into my somatic work and my breath work and all of that to be like, okay, I need to calm my nervous system down. It was affecting my hormones, right? I was breaking out constantly all the time. And like my stomach was in knots and there was certain food I couldn't eat. And it's actually really unhealthy for our body. And same with trauma, right? What's really interesting when you speak and listen to Gabor Mate is that, you know, depending on what happens in our life, it can actually decrease our life like expectancy and like how long we can live in the world, which is like wild. So yeah, it's important for so many reasons. A lot of our health issues are related to stress. And so even if you do somatic work to be like, I want to de-stress, I want to get my nervous system back to a state of like calm and balance. You know, we talk about life balance, right? We talk about it from the outside world. Actually, life balance is all about us and how we feel. It's actually got nothing to do with like how much we're doing in our day. If your nervous system is calm, you might be able to just do loads and fill your day with loads of things because your nervous system can take it. If your nervous system is really stressed and high and like on the edge and about to burst at any minute, like almost like have a panic attack or have a breakdown, you're not going to be able to have as much of a full day because yeah, your body just isn't able to almost have the capacity to hold you in everything you're experiencing in that day. And also I feel like having a calm nervous system allows us to actually have the capacity and the resilience to hold ourselves if really stressful situations happen. We can't always predict life, right? So like imagine, for example, like, you know, there's like a car accident that happens, right? If our nervous system is already calmer while that's kind of going into that situation, we're able to hold ourselves in that situation a lot more. We'll be able to react to the situation quicker. Whereas if we're highly stressed, we're going to go into like that freeze mode and everything will stop working. And I've been there, like, this is from like actual experience.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so many things, so many reasons, honestly. Health and wellness was like in every way.
Yeah. And I think it really is the start of it. If somebody is feeling things with their digestion, or I talk a lot about gut health because that's the place where I started. And I think actually the place to start really is nervous system regulation because your body just responds so well to that. And of course, you might also need all the other things depending on where you're at in your journey. We talked about this thing during the conference, this concept, which is the window of tolerance, or is it window of resilience? No, I think it's, well, I can't remember the exact wording, but talking about when you're really stressed, right, your nervous system will go up and then you might eventually calm down and it'll go back down. And that's like normal. It's going to happen to us throughout life. But when it gets out of that window of tolerance, that's when you mentioned panic attack or these kinds of things. This is where a lot of times, in order for our nervous system to be able to go back down, we need to be resourced. We need help. We need practitioners like yourselves. We need somebody there to be able to, or eventually other resources that we've learned help us, right? Like when I come out of that window, for me personally, it's often, you talked about control, because I'm like needing to control everything. I need to let go. I need to come back down and I need to just take care of myself. Usually it's at a time where it's like my people pleaser has woken up again and I've been doing everything for everybody else. And I need those resources. And today they don't always have to come from other people. Now they can come from within me to be able to go back down. But I love that like visual of like, it's okay. We're all going to come out of that window of tolerance. And like, eventually that's what makes it bigger and bigger and what makes us be able to accept more and be more resilient to stress. Because sometimes when people talk about these things, I feel like people picture themselves living on the beach and never having anything stressful come at them, which is just not the reality of life.
No, exactly. And I think this is the thing with emotions is that I think it's like 86 plus emotions, right? I dial it down to like the core 20, but we've got them no matter what we do.
Yeah.
You've always got anger and guilt and shame, and we have the capacity to feel all these emotions at any point in our life. But it's like taking it down almost like to the basics, right? So if you're thinking of like a graph of your emotions, if you could kind of plot where each of these emotions sit and how high and how intense you're feeling each of them, right? So like shame and anger might be really high and like joy actually might be really low, right? And so it's like, can we like create that balance so we can like bring like the shame and the guilt down a bit? So like if something happens, like you're saying, you've got like that window of tolerance to feel that emotion. Whereas like if everything's like at the top, this is where you feel like, yeah, life's overwhelming. It's all too much. Yeah. And this is where mental health can really plummet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Something we've talked about in the past too is how somatics is really just becoming a bit of a buzzword, which on the one side is super cool because a lot more people are finding out about it. Can you talk about the importance of why you would want a practitioner to be trauma informed and the continuous, I guess, knowledge that is being shared, and also how to just ensure that whatever you're going through it with somebody who can really hold that for you?
Yeah, it is everywhere now, like even compared to when we spoke last time. I think it's a word people are putting in front of everything, not realizing that we're using the word somatic, in a healing sense. Right.
Yeah.
And I think what's really important about that is like when we're healing through the body, we have to be so mindful about what that is and what that means.
Yeah.
Right. Like you said, we have to be able to feel safe in some way to be able to experience that emotion. Otherwise, we're going to re-traumatize ourselves, right? So being trauma informed means we can hold someone in the space to feel their emotions without re-traumatizing. And yeah, it's quite hard in a way because I see it a lot in the workout space where they're using somatics and releasing the emotions and stuff like that. And you know, it's all good that they're helping people, but the hard part of this work is you don't really want people to be left to experience this work on their own, right? If someone is buying your course and they're like, right, you're going to release loads of trauma from your hips by doing this exercise, you can release loads of trauma by doing this, and you're just giving them a course for them to do on their own, you have no idea what is going to happen to them in their experience, which to me is quite irresponsible. Because they could go through something really traumatic, and who have they got around them to support them in that space, to help them understand what's going on in that space? So I feel like we as practitioners have to be really careful about what we put out into the world and the services we share. Like a lot of my stuff, I don't pre-record anything. Like my group programs are all in person. I always have access to me through like Voxer, or they can message me on Instagram. Like I need to know that I am there for them if they need me, because sometimes we can be surprised by what comes up. And I feel like something to look out for is when you're buying something online or working with a practitioner, if they're being pushy in any way, they're making you feel less than, or they're making you feel small, or making you feel silly, that's not a safe space, right? You need to be able to absorb their content and feel safe, even just seeing them on Instagram, right? If you're feeling pressured in any way, or not that you won't be triggered sometimes, because you might, but it's just like knowing that difference of like, okay, can I be in a room with this person and can I feel safe to share how I really feel?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And I've been really grateful yeah, for the women that have come into my space, especially like when it was like so new to me, how, yeah, they felt so open to do it. Right. And I even have clients when they first work with me where they have their camera off. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a chat, but then when it comes to the somatic practice, they have the camera off because that feels safer for them in the moment. And they're like, I'm going to work to having my camera off, back on. And like, that's their goal. Right. Because you're showing how you feel through your body, which is so vulnerable. This is really vulnerable work. So
Yeah.
it's allowing and giving people the permission slip to decide for themselves. Like, that's all I really want for everyone. Like you were saying before, it's like, can I teach them to learn how to follow their intuition, to be guided by their own body, to make decisions that feel really aligned to them?
Yeah.
Because that means we're living like in that truth from ourselves, right? You know, the people pleasing, you know, I've so been there. You know, the controlling and all of that, it all literally comes down to feeling safe and safe around the people. And, you know, sometimes we have to adapt ourselves and change our environment and do things we don't want to do to feel safe. But if we can come to a place where we build that resilience and we can be more of ourselves in the world, and you can lead from that place of intuition and knowing where you can like make decisions. You're like, yes, I know this is me. I'm going to do that. That's so empowering. Like, that's what I ever want for anyone.
Yes. 100% yes. One of the things that I experienced when I was doing a session with a practitioner throughout the weekend was, I think, because it's becoming more of a buzzword, and we might have seen these videos and things of people like moving a certain in a group and like releasing and shaking and crying, and like that always put me a bit like, oh, this is like strange. Also, like, why am I seeing this on video and like being shown that? What I loved about learning in this space was it's not about completely and uncontrollably letting the emotion go. It's understanding, and actually sometimes even not understanding, as you said, like the thought pattern doesn't matter. Letting it go in a way that's so safe. One of the things that happened is I was lying, she uses a massage table. She also does Reiki and a lot of other things. But I was lying on a massage table, and there was a moment where she just put her hand on my belly and I just started crying. And I have no understanding in my head what was happening in that moment. It was just, I felt finally safe to be able to release something that needed releasing. And then there was a moment where I was like really going into more of like a sobbing state. And she was like, let's take a pause. Like, let's breathe. Let's like slow down. And we did a few exercises like the VU noise exercises. And it was really interesting for me to be like, oh, right, this isn't about that uncontrollably, like the things you might have seen, because I think in my head, that's like, oh, that's how you release trauma, is like if it's like really intense and big. And actually, it felt quite soft and slow. And I think that the other thing that came with all of this is that it takes time. And that I think sometimes in the somatic space, people might see it and they might be like, oh, I'm going to go to like this one session and then all my trauma is going to be released out of my body. And yeah, there's no like overnight fix.
No, oh my gosh, no. Yeah, that sounds interesting. It sounded like that was the somatic energy work, which I've seen a lot of, which is really, I actually want to try that myself. I haven't tried it before, which I think is really interesting because obviously they're tuning into your energy, right? But yeah, it is interesting because, yeah, I guess a lot of the work I do, there is a lot of body movements and it really varies. Like you said, it's about you understanding how you feel and how you want to let go of that. Sometimes it might be like, "Wah!" and you might be screaming and like letting anger out. And then other times you might just be like going into a place of self-acceptance and like hugging yourself and like swaying to the music and just like being really present and just like allowing like the tears to come, or it might not even be tears. It might just be an emotion. It might actually be finally connecting to emotion. A lot of people I work with find it hard to even connect to their body and like feel. So, you know, just starting there is really amazing. And I would say with that, I don't actually think we can ever be healed. I just don't. I don't believe that's true. So if you're ever signing up to anything and they say that you're going to be healed, just run. Just run.
Yes.
Yeah, because you know, you really have to think about what your intention is when you're going into this work. And I say, this isn't for everyone. as much as we can have fun with all of this work, and I like to really play with shadow and light in my sessions. We never will just have like a full heavy session. Like, I'm not about that. Yeah, we have to really think about what it is in life that our own mindset and emotions are stopping us from doing, and what do we want to achieve, right? You might be really happy in life as it is. You might even not want to do any emotional healing work, and you might just be loving life, right? Great. Like, honestly, go for it. But if you're just, I'm finding myself every morning and I can't get motivated and I'm having self-doubt and I'm not really making my business happen, and do you know what I mean? There's all these setbacks. It's like, okay, we can get through that. I never used to be a confident person. Like I said, I was so withdrawn. I would barely speak in social situations. And it's so interesting now how I'm just like more free to be myself and be weird on the internet and like dance on the internet and all these things. And yeah, I will still get self-doubt, but now I can bring myself back in and be like, hell no, you're not stopping yourself. You are continuing. You are making your dreams happen. So yeah, I feel like don't feel the pressure to do this work. Only do it if you feel it's going to benefit you in some way, and have the intention of what that is.
Yeah, all goes back to that intention. We're going to obviously add your Instagram on the show notes. I want everybody to go just check you out because your videos are super informative, actually, and also really fun in the way that you help people tune into being able to let the emotions out with different songs and moves and things. So I really love that. We end every episode with a few questions that I ask everybody. So I'll ask some of them to you now. How do you unlock your vitality these days?
Ooh. I don't know. I feel like my vitality is really connected to me feeling inspired. So, like, vitality for me is like that feeling of almost being unstoppable, and I have loads of ideas and I want to action them. Yeah, I'm feeling that excited feeling within. So, for me, that could even, like, a lot of the times it's reading a book, or I get really inspired by like watching the fashion catwalks for some reason. I don't know why that inspires me, but I get so many ideas from fashion. That's just how my brain works.
Makes sense as a designer.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, I would say that it's just taking that pause. And I've realized how important a pause is, and that a pause in your day is actually part of your business.
Yes.
People don't think that that's true. And I'm like, you pausing right now, you're going to be really creative if you just take a minute. So yeah, part of that is unlocking your vitality too.
Yeah. That just helped me take a really deep breath. The next one is, what are you saying no to these days?
Ooh, oh my God. Very sassily, I'm like in a phase of my life where my eyes are so open to how people have treated me before. And I really fell into like that trap of people pleaser so much that I would diminish who I am and almost spend all my money on other people. And my whole life was like, yeah, built around making sure they were okay. And now I'm realizing there's been certain people in my life that actually quite like narcissistic. And so I'm now taking the control of my own life to decide who is in it. And I know that can sound really harsh. Like, I'm not really about those kind of concrete walls and completely blocking people out. I will always happily have a conversation first to see if we can get on the same page. But I'm at a point now where I will not compromise who I am for anyone else.
Yes. We should all take a piece of that advice. And it's interesting. What you said just resonated a lot. I've also realized those things about certain people in my life. So the last one I'll ask you is, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
As we've talked about that today, great question. I always picture myself as my younger self. She's like 5 years old. She's in a very particular house, sitting on the sofa. And each time I go to see her, she's in a different emotion. So I'm sure this answer will be very different depending on what day it is. What would I say to her? I think I would tell her to keep dancing and keep being creative. Because I think that part of myself, as much as I loved it, got shut down a bit. Also, just like I guess it's not advice, but just telling her like everything's going to change for you one day, and like how you feel now isn't going to be forever. Like just wait. Wait to see what's on the other
Yes.
side, because it's amazing.
It is. Khrissie, thank you so much. This was a beautiful conversation, and I'm so excited for everybody to listen and connect with you outside of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So blessed to be on this podcast with you. Thank you.
Yay. Bye, guys. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you loved this episode as much as I did. If you are enjoying the show, please feel free to rate and review, share it with a friend. This is truly how we are able to grow. So, whether you are listening directly on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or on Google, any way that you can just share it with a friend, and even through social media, letting us know what you loved about it, what you got out of the episode. And if you haven't yet, you can subscribe or rate and review depending on all the places that you get your podcasts. But I just wanted to say a big, big thank you if this is the first episode you've ever listened to, or if you've been here for a while, or if you've been here since the very beginning. Unlocking my vitality has been a beautiful journey into learning, actually. And this podcast has really helped me learn through different people, through your feedback, through, yeah, just seeing and hearing beautiful women and the work that they're doing and sharing it with the world. So, thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next week. Bye.